Hi and welcome to another hands-on video. Today I want to show you rapid application development for the Fitbit Web API using the FNC Cloud Pack, and we're going to convert an existing class into a Delphi component because Delphi is all about components. We want to drop components on a form and it's much easier than writing code. Just to preface this, there is a part 1 of this video. And this video introduces you to what Fitbit is, what kind of information we're going to extract from the web service, and we're going to develop the class in very much detail. The overall video is 1 hour and 20 minutes long. And this is a follow-up because right now, if we look in our main form, we find something like service equals tfitbitservice.create. We pass over an owner or the lack of an owner with nil, and then at the end of the application we free the service class, and that is something that quite a lot of Delphi developers don't even touch if there is no component, like you see right here, because Delphi is all about rapid application development. And this will be the result at the end of this video. You'll have the tFitbit service on your tool palette with your own category. Of course, I used my own company name as the category, and in a future video, I'm just giving a hint of that right here, we'll build a second component which will allow you to build reporting for the Fitbit service, like create a chart, create a Excel document, a PDF document for reporting. This is all, of course, having the exemplary character that you can easily transfer to your own projects. So here you'll see the component dropped on the form. It is looking a little bit different to these components, and that is the first thing that you notice whenever you use the FNC framework, because the FNC framework is not dedicated to the VCL, FireMonkey, or Lazarus component framework. No, it is dedicated to all of them, and also the web. So you can use the same component or the same control even on all the frameworks, and that reason makes it kind of obvious that the classes are not derived from the VCL base class if you work with the VCL. No, TMS developed their own base class, and they kind of found a way to make it look the same way on the form designer in a VCL application, in a FireMonkey application, and also in a web application with TMS Web Core, or if you use the Lazarus IDE, you'll see the component on your forms as well. So this is where the minor nuance and difference comes from, but also for component development, you have one minor difference when it comes to these tiny little icons here, but that is exactly what this video is about. You'll learn about all those things, what you need to do to make your components not only work inside of the IDE, no, but also make them look nice. And in addition to that, to the tool palette, we're also going to add the icon to the Delphi splash screen that you see right here. I have like 2 components installed, the wonderful welcome page from Daniel Wolf, which I generally use to replace the Delphi standard startup page. This one has the ability to store your favorite projects and categorize them. So that's number 1. And here you see the component that we're going to create in this video, the Flix Engineering Fitbit Web API version 1.0. And of course, it's registered. These are the 2 texts that you can specify. You can specify the main text, which is a little bit larger than the additional text. For example, Daniel uses it here to write down his contact information. Usually it's used like registered trial. You can use it whatever seems logic to you. So what we're going to do in this example, first we're going to convert the existing tFitbit service that we created in the last video into a component, and then we're going to add a component icon for the form designer and for the tool palette. This is all showing the case of a VCL application, but because it is FNC, the FNC control will also be drawn correctly in any of the other form designers. There might be modifications necessary for the tool palettes in the Lazarus IDE. I have not looked into that, but the component itself, the icon, will draw on all the different platforms. And very Embarcadero Delphi specific. We will add a splash screen icon to the IDE, and obviously that is very specific to the Delphi IDE. This project right now is the finished demonstration client that already has the T-Fitbit service on the form, also the T-Fitbit reporting control. And if we look at the T-Fitbit service, let me drag the object inspector right here so I can see it better. You see that you not only get the properties that we defined ourselves in the service. Now, of course, we also get all the inherited properties, which allows you to set the authentication details that so far we're setting them in code. You could set them if you wanted to right now in the object inspector. All of that is available. Now you also see here that one of the data structures is defined in the published section right now, which is not making a lot of sense. As you see that the object inspector can't show this because it's a T object list. The type is of course correct, but that is something I should not put in the published section. I let this in intentionally in this video, so you see what happens if you publish a property that can't be interpreted by the object inspector. So this most likely will go over to the public or protected section, so we can use it inside of the control or in the public section outside of the control, but it's not being shown in the object inspector. What we also see here are specific things that we define inside of our components. So far, there are no properties that we defined that we needed to customize here. That will change with the reporting service, where we will be able to define the format of the chart, and we have to link the service, which is of course the T-Fitbit service here. And you can see that is something the IDE does for you. It refers you to the other component, only allows you to select the type that fits. And if you look at the implementation later, when we build the report, you'll see it's really straightforward. There is no magic involved. The most important thing, however, is when wanting to develop a component is you need to create a package. And I have seen many Delphi projects in my life, and very few of them use packages, which is a big surprise to me, but it's just a fact. And also a lot of people do not like creating components anymore, but maybe this video and also this demonstration will show you how useful it is to use components in the end, because I can use this component everywhere now, and it's nicely wrapped in a package that I can deploy on all of my development machines, which makes it easy. So not only third-party development should consider using components or custom controls, you can do that yourself. And I have to say the IDE makes it very easy to work with controls that you develop yourself, because you can create a project group. You have inside of your project group, you have the package that will contain all the information for your component, and then you can create a second project. In this case, it's a VCL project that contains your form to test the component or the control. Just to emphasize this, so I say component, I usually mean it's something that is non-visual. Like here, for example, the Fitbit service, it's not visual. But if you go over here, for example, the button, that is a control because it is drawn on the surface. And I think the terminology has also been transferred into the VCL library with the base classes that are being used, T-Wind control and T-component. So without further ado, let's look at the implementation, and I'll explain in detail what I did. So we had the VCL client example, and that example contained all the units for the Fitbit service. And that was the first thing that I basically did. I created a second directory on my hard disk and copied everything over, meaning the Fitbit service path file with the Fitbit service. And then I also did a little bit of refactoring. The Fitbit classes unit that we previously had, I split them up. For example, we have now a heartbeat unit with the data structure in there, because I also will add the user profile in the next video, where you learn how to digest the user profile from the web service API. But not only, the video won't be about how to add the user API, it will be about how you can store the information of your service, that you don't need to reconnect all the time, but more about that later. So let's get back to the component part of it. So I copied all the Pascal files to a different directory, and then I created a new package in that directory. So if we go here, if we say file, new, other, sometimes there's also package in here. I'll reconfigure that all the time. So you say Delphi package, and that's it. That's the first step. And in my case, I immediately went over to the package options, and for the description, I entered the description for the component package, and this is very important, I said it's design time only. I don't want any runtime package or anything like that. I'm not a big fan of runtime packages. I want my applications all bundled nicely inside of an executable. I know that for your specific use case, runtime packages might make sense if you have very complex applications and you have a modular approach. I don't want to talk you into anything here, but this component package for the Delphi IDE, I defined it as design time only, and those are the most important settings. And I also moved the package up to the first project being compiled inside of the project group, and the second package, or the second VCL project stays in there. And the VCL project only has the main form. That's it if you are still where we left the first video. So what we need to do, and this is the nice thing about it, in order to make our class a component, if we look at the source code, is actually, let me check this here, is actually nothing. The only thing I did, I moved the class into a package, and the changes to the source code are 0. The only thing that I emphasized by showing it to you inside of the IDE, you have to make good decisions what you're going to put in the published section and what you're going to put in the public section. So we don't want to publish this. We want to put it right here. If you wanted to have designer or object inspector support for your data structure, there are different classes that you need to derive your list. You can't use an object list because the IDE cannot use generic types there. You would have to use a class that is derived from, I think it's called collection. Look up examples in the VCL. There are many examples how you can define your own list types with custom editors. For example, the field editor for data sources or data sets is one of those examples. So we moved that over there, and some other thing I did, the on hearts beats received event that we defined, of course, goes into the published section. And the nice thing that happens is, if we go over to the object inspector, we have all the events from the FNC base class that gives us the authentication and the authorization, that we implemented the last time to connect to the web service, but also it adds the event that I defined. So if you look here on heartbeats received, I can implement that method now using code, and that's really amazing if you think about it. So your code really on the forms and stuff looks really like you were working with a VCL component that you build yourself, and I mean that's what building your own components is all about, right? So all that happens automatically. There's no implementation that I needed to add. That is just something that happens, that Delphi, the IDE, does for you. If it is a type that it recognizes, like the tNotify event, that is just something it can do. You know, Delphi realizes, oh, this is an event, so I know what to do. I put it on the object inspector second page with the events and all that. And also all these public events won't appear anywhere on the object inspector. Okay, so no change necessary. We just put the class into a package with all the dependencies. So here you see the U heartbeat. That was in the first video, it was the U Fitbit classes pass. So no changes made there, but if we were to use it like this, we wouldn't have an icon, we wouldn't have any of that. And this is why I did this video, because as far as I know, there's no video for FNC, what you need to do in order to get the same kind of experience in all the different platforms and how you build your own custom component, especially based on a service implementation using the FNC Cloud Pack. So selecting, double clicking the package, you also see that the package has been installed. So you could do this right away. You can right click it, and then because you said it's a design time package, the IDE will offer you the option to install the package or to uninstall the package. So let me close the main form here before I go on, because I don't want to have the main form open when I uninstall the component. I mean, even though nothing would happen as long as you don't open it up. And so we right click it here, we say uninstall, and now if you switch the selection over, you see that this is grayed out. So your package is no longer installed. If you right click and select install, the component will be installed into your IDE. And the nice thing about it is you immediately get like a message, and this message says the following new components have been registered, and that is the first thing we need to do. We need to tell the IDE, hey, this package contains the following components and we want to register them on the tool palette. And how do you do that? Well, you add another file into the package. I called it the ufitbit reg for registration. And that obviously uses, in the implementation part, it uses all the units that you need in order to compile your component or to reference the component. The important thing is, however, that you need to include design interface and tools API. Those you need in order to add the icons and all that stuff. The same goes for the VCL graphics. VCL graphics means this is specifically for the VCL. So if you wanted to install this component also in FireMonkey, you would have to use a compiler directive to say, hey, this part only in the VCL and the other part for FireMonkey, in order to generate this bitmap here. So also important is that you need the procedure called register. That is where all the magic happens. So in the interface, you say, hey, we have a procedure in this unit called register, and that has one single call called register components. That is, by the way, defined in the classes unit. So if you type classes dot, doesn't work, code completion. Okay, so, but it is in the classes library register components, and then the first parameter designates the tab in Delphi 7 terms, you know, if you remember what the old tool palette looked like. So nowadays you would call it the category, which is Flix Engineering. And then we have the class, T Fitbit Service. So that is the class name. You're not using an instance, you're using the class name at this part. And you can specify multiple components by separating the class names with a comma. So this is an array of class names, so to speak. And because I want to register them both on the same tab, I can use this. If I wanted to register the Fitbit reporting on a different tab, let's do that. So service, and now we write register components, and let's call it Flix. Let's say Fitbit reporting, and we make this Fitbit API, and so T Fitbit Fitbit reporting is the class. We're going to build that class in a later video, just as a reminder. But this is how easily you can register your classes. But right now they wouldn't have an icon. Right now the FNC component would be a white square, and the tool palette would show the default icon. The default icon looks like little component parts like graphical shapes, like a cube, a sphere, and that kind of stuff. You've seen it for sure, because sometimes you install components and the image resources aren't found. And that is actually the next thing we need to add. We need to add a RC file for the resource compiler. And I added two separate ones because this one we need for an FNC control. If your control is, your component is just for the VCL, you don't need this, but you need it definitely for a FNC control. So you need a 24 times 24 PNG, and you add the RC file with the name of the component, which is T Fitbit service, all capitalized, very important because it's being distinguished, and then RC data, which means that binary information is supposed to be included, and the file name for this binary information is right here. So if we go into the Explorer, and this is where my package file is, I go to ... and then I go to resources, and here you see all the different images, and there's smartwatch _24 PNG, and this is exactly the image that we're going to use. And if I enable the preview, we can also see it right away. Here you see the 24 times 24. I also have 32 pixels and 128 pixels in PNG, and I also have everything in BMP. Why do I have that? Well, Delphi has been along for a very long time. So back in the day, the IDE did not understand PNG. So if you want your component or control to work with older versions of the IDE, I would have to look this up. I have this written down here somewhere about the compatibility. So pre-version 10.2.2, 10.2 was Rio was 10.3, so that must be Tokyo. So before Tokyo release number 2, which is 10.2.2, only bitmaps were supported, or actually pre 10.2.2 you had a different kind of bitmap which had transparency defined as color keyed, and 10.2.2 introduced bitmaps and PNGs with alpha channel for transparency, which you see right here. This is transparent in the alpha channel. So back in the day you had to define, like, that's where all these pink icons sometimes come from, the pink resource files that you find with your third-party component set if you look into the source code, in order to define transparency with a color that does not appear in the icon itself. That is no longer necessary. You can use your favorite bitmap tool to create an icon in PNG and BMP. And starting in version 10.2.2, you can use PNG images in Delphi. And that is what I define right here for the T Fitbit service DCR. Why DCR? Because back in the day, I started with Delphi too. You created a DCR file with these kind of resources. This is just a means for me to distinguish the FNC specific file from the Delphi specific file. And now this is where it gets complicated, because back in the day, you only had this one. You had the Fitbit service, the class name with bitmap, and then you had a 24 times 24 bitmap, and that was used by the IDE. But nowadays you can define 16 pixels, 32 pixels, and 128 pixels, and the IDE supports bitmap types for these: 16 pixels, 32 pixels, 128 pixels. And if we go back to the Explorer, these are the files for it. And as you can see, you not only do the class name with 16, 32, 128, you do the same with an underscore PNG added to it, and then you change the type of the resource to RC data and include the PNG files. And that is all you need to do in order to create the component icons for your components. So here you see the Fitbit control with all the different names that are used by the IDE to find the different images. And that way you have everything nicely registered in your tool palette. So going over to the registration file again, you see that this is not mentioned anywhere in source. At least at first you think so. If you scroll up in the implementation part of my registration unit, I include the Fitbit service DCR file, which is this one with all the icons. Why didn't I include the one for FNC, meaning this one here, the PNG image, which is named T Fitbit service RC data? This is again talking to the developer of the FNC framework at TMS. This does not have to be included in the registration unit for the IDE. That is to be imported into the actual file where the service is defined. So if you look here, T Fitbit service is defined in this unit. And then if we go here to the implementation, there we find the resource added to the unit. And you might notice that I have .res and .rc. That is something, I don't know when that started, when that was possible. If you add an RC file to your project file in the Delphi IDE, it automatically invokes the resource compiler, which compiles a res file from an RC file. You all know one res file that you get all the time if you have your form class defined. The Delphi compiler automatically generates res files for resources that are hosted on your forms. It is something that works without you ever even noticing. But if you look at the main form in your applications and you go here, you see that here the resource is being included, that is being created. And by the way, the asterisk here does not stand for all the DFM files. No, the asterisk in association with the $R command is associated with the file name. So in this case, it becomes forms.main.dfm. I learned it rather recently. It has not been that long ago. And I've been developing software with Delphi for 25 years now, next month. So it's been a long time not knowing what the asterisk stood for. So that is it, really. You define a registration file, you define a register procedure, and the register procedure registers all the components. And if you want to add a splash icon, called the add splash method or procedure. I always say method. It technically is not a method. I have to correct myself here because there is no class, no object, so it's a procedure and nothing more. So the procedure add splash defines a bitmap, and that is why you need the graphics class. And if you were to register with another framework but the VCL, you would need to use something else. And this is something, again, documentation, Googling, force demand load state DL disable is a command that is required. I have no idea what it does. I'm honest with you here. It's copy paste from the documentation. And then you create a bitmap and you load the bitmap from the resource using the T Fitbit service name. And thankfully we have this resource here. If we go back to the file, so we use this T Fitbit service bitmap. This is the bitmap that is being loaded. And then we call yet another service from Delphi, which is called Splash Screen Services add plugin bitmap. And here you specify what this plugin or what the component package or whatever you want to register is called. In the case, that I showed you on the slides. It was a welcome page from Daniel Wolf. So, and here you can also add like registered. You pass the handle of the bitmap, not the bitmap itself. And yet again, I have no idea what this parameter does. It's to be set to false. So this is actually something I took out of the documentation from Embarcadero, how to build a component package and how to display the splash icon there. So that is all you need to do. And then you can build your package. And after building it, you can install it. And this is something I can also say, if it is already installed, which you see right here, rebuilding does suffice. You don't need to uninstall and install again. The only thing, and this, again, why we do this video, you might notice if you switch over, the images are here, and now I type Fitbit to serve, it's still registered at Flix Engineering. And that is something that either requires you to uninstall and reinstall, and it might even get more crazy than that, and this is the reason why I'm showing you. So we install this, because long story short, for performance reasons, at some point Embarcadero introduced a so-called package cache and a cache for the tool palette, meaning the tiny little images, if you have lots and lots and lots of components installed, are not regenerated or reloaded for each startup of the IDE. In order to make the startup of the IDE faster, they found a compromise that these images and everything is not updated each time. If you see, it's not updating. And if we go over here into the Fitbit reg, we can clearly see that we created something else. So the only thing to do is, honestly, is to restart the IDE. But before you do that, you have to delete the package cache manually. And I don't know if Embarcadero will address this at some point, but right now you have to edit the registry in order to fix this problem. Uninstall the package. That is step number 1. We verify by moving. We close the IDE. We save everything. And then we call regedit, registry editor. And of course, we go into the software. Under current user, we go to Embarcadero. That's the first thing. Embarcadero BDS 21 is my current version with Sydney. It is 19 for Tokyo, it's 20 for Rio, and so on. And there you find the key, which is called palette cache or package cache. That's the number 1. And if you expand that, you see all the packages that have been cached. And let's see if my Fitbit package is in there. Yes, it has been cached. So I delete that entry. And then let's see if there's one more. I know that there's one more, which is either the here palette, and then there's the cache. And if you expand that, you see that also all the package names are being cached, and I delete this one. Yes. And now, if we load up the IDE, we should see the icons in their correct categories. File, reopen, Fitbit Web API, and we see Fitbit service not found because we have the main form open, ignore all. This is all expected because we have a controller component on the form that's no longer there. See, it's missing. We close the form. No, we don't want to remove the declaration. We don't want to save the changes. You have to be a little bit careful. We double click on the package. We rebuild the package again, just to be on the safe side. And it's compiling. Okay, and now we install. We should now get the message that the 2 components have been installed again. T-Fitbit reporting, T-Fitbit service. Okay, we switch over to the VCL project again. We open the main form. There you go. The components are there with their respective icons and also in different categories. So don't get mad or annoyed if that doesn't work. You can also switch the registry key, the base key, to use for component development. I know a few people do that as well. bds.exe, the executable file for the Delphi IDE or RAD Studio, has a parameter called -r for the registry key to use. That is also something component developers do in order to circumvent issues with the caching mechanism. And I'm quite sure I've seen it as well. There is packs out there to disable that functionality. So if you develop a lot of components or controls, you might want to disable this functionality. But I just wanted to show you the default setup for Delphi is like this, and the icons and the categories and all that sort of stuff is not being updated unless you delete the package name from the caches. So that's that. So you've seen it all, really, that you need to set everything up. So right now in your source code, you still have the field fservice here. So I removed fservice from the private declaration. Instead, I dropped the Fitbit service on the form, set its name to service. And what I haven't done so far is, if we look at the source code, the source code still has all the different client ID secret and all that kind of stuff in here. I could set that in the form. I'm going to leave that here. But what I'm definitely going to change is the onConnected call, which you see right here. OnConnected is set to when connected. And I can go to the service, go to events, and there should be onConnected. It's right here. I double click. The IDE generates the code for me, and I copy it over to here, service connected, and I remove the line that hooks it up differently. So I say onConnected, when connected is gone. Also, I have here button, heartbeat, click. We have the line service on heartbeats received self. We did that as well. So let's take that away as well. Remove this. So the event on heartbeats received, that is something we want to have somewhere else because we have that event now. So we can remove it here. We go to our component and have on heartbeats received, double click, we add the code. And of course, we also need to copy the variable declarations over. And the next time you do stuff like that, you can develop it right away without defining these methods yourself in code. You can simply use the component in the next project. So these declarations are no longer necessary because the IDE does it for us right here using the information from the component. So we compile and make sure that you double clicked on the VCL client, and we run the application. Let's take the 29th, connect. The web browser will come up, heartbeats, and there you go. So it still works the same way, just with the difference that we use a component now that does all the work. And one final thing about the package that you weren't able to see because I didn't build it from scratch. The requires part. That is something very, very important to mention. So the Delphi IDE, the first time you compile your package, will find out which of these you will need, and you'll get a dialog like, do you want to add this or that to your package? And you will have the option to simply say yes. And I can only tell you, please say yes, because to find these manually is a whole lot of work. So if you miss out and something is missing, for example, if you use a VCL class and you can't find it, you probably forgot to have VCL DCP added as a reference to your package. So what you need to do is you right click on the requires part and click add reference. And then you need to specify the package name that is referenced, and these DCP files are usually contained in your Delphi installations. DCP are like DCU for units, just for packages. That's why they are called DCP. And these exist for all the controls or third-party packages that you have installed. That's the reason why you find, for example, here, the FNC Cloud Pack, the for the reporting that we're going to build soon, the Flexel packages. So that is all being added. And also the RTL is always added to a package, because without the RTL, the runtime library of Delphi, you wouldn't be able to use a package at all. So these things are usually added automatically, but if you by accident say no, you have to add them yourself. And I'm going to expand that a little bit so you see the list of packages that you need for the VCL and for the TMS Cloud Pack. So that is all I really have to say and explain how to convert our existing class into a component. Have you seen this before? Of course you have. And let's create a new VCL application. We save our package in our package group. So for example, if you go to Maps, FNC Maps, look at this. This is a control that TMS built, and it is an FNC control, but it works the same way. They registered these tiny little icons the same way like you did. And if you, for example, take a VCL control from TMS, for example, the advanced edit control, same thing. They registered this image the same way. They registered the T advanced edit class with a T advanced rec and everything like you just learned in this video. So you're now able to build components or controls with Delphi very easily using packages, and also integrating the icons with regard to old Delphi versions and new Delphi versions in your IDE. And you're even able to build to add an icon to the splash screen when the Delphi IDE starts. There's plenty more available through the so-called OTAPI, which is a library or a collection of functions and procedures to integrate your components more into the Delphi IDE. For example, if you right-click on the component, you can add stuff to the component menu. And if I remember correctly, I even have something about that on my blog, Flix Engineering Pixels component. Let's see, I wrote that years and years and years ago. Here it is, introducing the Pixels COM Delphi component. That was before, I just want to mention that that was before, it was written in 2016. That was before the FNC Cloud Pack existed. And here you see, if you look, this is the default component icon. That is what the default component icon looks like if you don't want to spend the time and look for a resource on the net or or draw your own icon. This is what it looks like by default. But what this description has is that you can actually add stuff to the context menu and all that kind of stuff. It is all explained in this one or in the follow-up blog posts that are in the September 2016. I'll also show you how to add an item to the context menu. But this explanation doesn't focus on the component icon and on the cloud services as much as it does go into detail about how to parse REST information from the web service and how to retrieve an image. And then the blog post also goes into detail how to do asynchronous calls. But this was all before, yet again, before Embarcadero introduced the parallel library. So this is all a little bit more complex than it needs to be nowadays. But the description with regards to how to integrate into the IDE and build a context menu and build a little dialogue, that is all up to date today. So, and with that, I can only tell you what I have in store next. Next, we're going to look how we can store the access keys between sessions, because the service that we use right now has the flaw whenever we want to connect to the Fitbit API, the login dialog is being shown, and you have to authenticate over and over and over again. And that is something that the FNC Cloud Pack offers that you don't need to do. And that is what we're going to show you in the next video. With that all in mind, please don't hesitate to go to fnc.tmssoftware.com to download a trial of the FNC Cloud Pack and learn more about FNC in general, how powerful of a Delphi developer you can become developing for multiple platforms at the same time with one component set. And now with this video, you've even gotten insight into developing your own components based on other controls or components inside of the FNC framework.